We can see the definable qualities. Obviously, having Ardie Savea there, his performance, his inspiration, his leadership is massive. There's a lot of comment about Rieko Ioane. Why isn't he ripping defences to shreds? Will you name me one centre that does that? It was just the ferocity of the tackling. And to me, if there was one moment in the game that set the standard for the whole match, Sua Ali'i, who was looking really dangerous, gets the ball and he's absolutely scythed down by Balin Sullivan.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Super Rugby Round 7, and only 4 games played. We're back to a full round this coming weekend, but what a result for Moana Pasifika. As I started the program by saying, I think this is more than just a coming of age win. I think it is a season defining and franchise redefining win. If they can play like that every week, then they are absolutely legitimate. And maybe, as Tony Johnson joins us again from Sky Sport, welcome Tony, maybe what it says about MP is now reflective of what we were just discussing off air a little bit about any team can beat any team in this competition. Truly, they were 11th playing the team that was meant to go top with a bonus point.
Yeah.
And, this is more than Crystal Palace beating Manchester City because they overpowered them. They physically overpowered them. It's not a one-off cup tie, I don't think. This is a signal to me that says this team can go on from there. I hope so.
Yeah, it's funny, with the limited number of games over the weekend, I thought, maybe, a bit of a lull, what sort of a weekend we're actually going to have here. In the end, we had a remarkable weekend.
Great weekend.
Look, a couple of little numbers before we start talking about the more sort of obvious sides of Moana Pasifika and their performance. Firstly, they are scoring as many points per game as any team in the competition. It's averaging out about 39 points a game, the same as the Chiefs. They are the most points per game, those two teams in the competition. The unfortunate thing for Moana is that they are also conceding
they
the
leak
most
a lot.
points.
Yeah.
They've had 2 games where they've conceded over 50, and that's blown things out. I thought the defence was a lot better against the Crusaders, although they had the ball so much that, it was hard for the Crusaders to stop the flow once it got going. So there's obviously a thing that they have to work on. If that consistency that you were talking about, is tightening up their defence, because there's no doubt their attack when it gets going is phenomenal. Secondly, this is the first time that they've beaten 2 New Zealand teams
in a season.
Other New Zealand teams in a season. In fact, of the wins they had 4 wins last year, 1 against the Drua, 3 against Australian teams. I think their first year they beat the Hurricanes in a golden point game, and that was probably their only other win over a New Zealand team in that time. I may be wrong. I think that's the case. So that is a significant thing. Winning in Christchurch for the first time. Yeah.
Beating the Crusaders for the first time.
Yeah, priceless. And then you come to, we can see the definable qualities that obviously having Ardie Savea there, his performance, his inspiration, his leadership is massive. We've talked about the calm leadership of the back line, the navigation of Patrick Pellegrini, who's kicking out a hand is as good as anyone in this competition. So there's those factors. And then you get into the things that no stat can talk about. There was a lot of emphasis on the team culture in the first couple of years. They focused a lot on that, defining who we are, who we represent, what we are. Yeah. And I think now that's starting to come to the fore, and that, the performance is great. But when it comes down to those moments in the game where the game's on the line or here's the chance, you can see the passion that's driving them, and you can see it after the game. When someone like Tana starts getting a bit emotional after a game, you can see they've got the balance there. So their performance has improved, and then they've got that really powerful thing driving them that, as I say, no number can define. So I agree. I think this was a massive step in their journey. But consistency, it's really, really hard, and all teams are finding this, to produce 2 epic performances like that in a row, and that's going to be the challenge for them.
Well, they've got New South Wales who are coming off getting absolutely walloped by the Hurricanes as well, and that is a game now where you think MP should win that game. Look, we had Sailala Mapasua on last week, and I challenged him about that first half performance against the Chiefs and what it meant, that second half performance, and very graciously he said, I agree with you. He said, we can't celebrate that game because of conceding 43 points. And after he came on, I was really interested to see how they would respond from that second half where they played so well. But the first half was where they lost that game, and you were there obviously calling that game. And then to see them put that together a complete performance. They didn't let the Crusaders in the game. And Tony, after half-time, I'm sitting there watching thinking, okay, how does the second half unfold here? Do the Crusaders come back? Because that's what we all expected. They strangled them out of the game.
Yeah,
they strangled them out.
And it sort of quite soon after half-time reached a point you start thinking there's no way they can come back here unless something goes catastrophically wrong, someone gets sent off or whatever, there's an injury. And you mentioned the coaching staff. I think Tana's got some good people around him, but I still think that their first half performance in Pukekohe was not great. They got absolutely but they came back, and I just think back to that great shot in the changing room, and Tana, there's the huddle there, and the calm messaging there. He's not ranting, he's not raving. Yep. And I think this is also a defining time in his coaching career as well. And when you're being given the messaging by such a player who's held in such great regard, that's got to count for a lot too. So look, it's just adding another ingredient.
Isn't it? It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah,
and hopefully they can go on from here, because I started the show by saying what I've always wanted for this team is for them not to be treated like a novelty, and not to be patronised, and not to be this team that's been added on for whatever reasons, but to be competitive every week and be genuine in their top 6 chances and prospects, and to be a team that, instead of being a team that most teams look at and think that's a win for us, that they fear this team.
Well, yeah, and you look at the Blues' second half of the season, and the Blues are obviously they've got them twice.
Yeah. Changes everything about those games.
And because now it's a big challenge for the Waratahs, who are going along really well, just coming off their first win over the Brumbies in 7 goes,
something like that.
And they got absolutely spanked in Wellington, and they've lost a couple of really good players. A shame to see Max Jorgensen going off, because he is one of the most exciting players in the competition. So they're going to be down a little bit on strength, and that's going to be a big challenge for them, because now Moana Pasifika go back and play in front of their home crowd, which seems to be working out well for them. So
hopefully it's a huge crowd too.
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, look, they can actually, if they get a win this weekend, then genuinely they put themselves in with the finals chance as well.
Well, anyone who can, at this stage of the season, anyone who can string together 2, 3, 4 wins in a row, you're going to be in the frame.
Whereas the Crusaders fly to Suva.
Yeah.
And against a Drua side again, who are going to be
playing. Is it Suva or is it Lautoka? Because there's a
Suva,
big difference.
This one. This one. Okay. So and they're going to be desperate for a win, as are the Drua. Then you've got this matchup coming this weekend. Here we are, 7 rounds in. There's an Aussie side at the top of the table, Tony.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that it's the Reds. If there was going to be one, always you think Brumbies are going to be thereabouts, but the Reds, to me, the sum total of the parts and what they've got driving them behind the scenes, right from the word go, I thought they'd be the team to beat. They get themselves to the top of the table, and then so that sets up an absolute marquee match. Friday night in Hamilton.
Yeah.
You've got 1 against 2.
1 against 2.
And one isn't the Chiefs.
That's right. And the Chiefs coming off that bye.
Which will be helpful. I think that'll help them. I think they were just getting to the stage where teams start to look a little bit banged up. I mean, your guy like Quinn Tupai, who's just been playing the most sensational footy. And for him, I think to have a week off, just to freshen up, hopefully get a couple of other guys back from injuries. If they can put a close to full strength team out there, what a match this will be.
Match. And then obviously you've got the Crusaders, who are going to have to bounce back from that, because here was a team that after they beat I was just fully expecting them to go top of the table, and I was thinking with the bonus points. So, And look, something like, I don't know what the stat was, 97% of people watching thought that the Crusaders were going to win that game. So it was a hell of a match, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. And look, again, just when you look like a team's building a role, and we were talking about them last week, getting back to being the Crusaders of old, this happened.
At the top of the table,
So, there's 2 ways of looking at it. I guess it's glass half full, glass half empty. Is it inconsistency on their part, or is it just this thing that I think is, you really want in a league or a championship, something like this, where, as you say, you can't drop your guard or come out with a 75 or 80% performance against anyone.
Any team,
I was a bit shocked, by what I was seeing early on, and then in the end, you just sort of sit back and you just enjoy it for what it is.
It was complete because it was 80 minutes. And then you look at the Reds now, who are at the top of the table. The only game they've lost was to the Crusaders during that cyclone weekend when a few players didn't come over, and so this is a massive test for them. But also, I mean, I've never bought into this whole thing about, God, we've got to look after Australian rugby. They can look after themselves. But I do like the fact that in this particular year, where they need a lot of things to go right for them, that that Queensland side is actually sitting where it is. And New South Wales, up until the weekend, were doing bloody well as well. They'd won 4 games as well. So it just means that this competition is getting some legs back in Australia as well, which we need it to.
Yeah, and it's important too in terms of getting the turnouts, getting more enthusiasm, because you're looking at the sporting landscape over there, and it really is dominated by the NRL and also the AFL at the moment. I mean, watching Auckland City playing,
Brisbane last night.
Brisbane in front of a really small crowd, and so hopefully this generates. And they've got the Lions tour coming up, and that. So, the one thing the Reds will have to improve is their line out, because they're not going to beat the Chiefs if they only win 55% of their own line out ball. I thought having Salakai Loto back in the team would really add something to their forward pack, but their line out was really wonky, and so that's something that they've got to really work on.
How do you look at the Canes now after that? Because it was 10-7 going into halftime, and then 2 quick tries basically took the game out of New South Wales' grasp, didn't they? And then it was 24-7, and you didn't think the Canes would do. Are they a 50-point better team than New South Wales? And look, they beat the Highlanders because it's been a bit of a stop-start season, and now are they a legitimate contender?
Well, once they got going, once they got their attack going, they were just unstoppable. And of course, what it meant was that they started to play with confidence, and there's never been anything more dangerous in the rugby. When you see that, like that back door pass that Ruben Love threw, right on the money, 25-metre pass.
Well, look, he's done that in practice before. You don't just throw that in a game, do you? I mean, he's obviously done that many times in
training. That was just a measure of the mood that they were in,
Yeah.
and I defy any team, if they can get front football like they had, they're hard to stop. But I actually think that was a result built on defence, and you mentioned how tight it was heading up to half-time. It was the tackling that... they made it quite clear before the game. Lachlan McCaffrey, their assistant coach, said, we've got to win the battle of the advantage line, the gain line. We've got to win that, because if they win it, that allows Roygaard to run the show. It was an interesting observation, and it was quite an open sort of thing for a coach to say before the game, and good on him for saying it. But they didn't. But I think more to the point, it was just the ferocity of the tackling. And to me, if there was one moment in the game that set the standard for the whole match, Sua Ali'i, who was looking really dangerous, gets the ball and he's absolutely scythed down by Balin Sullivan. Totally legitimate tackle, went low, arms around the legs, just absolutely took his legs out from underneath him. And to me, that kind of set the mark. This is the line in the sand, and it's over there. It's not here, and I think a lot of things came on from that. But as I say, once they get that attack going, there's just so many dangerous players there. And when you think about you look at their midfield. Obviously, at the start of the season, they were probably going to be looking at a first-choice midfield of Riley Higgins, one of the up-and-coming stars of New Zealand rugby, and Proctor, who is a very well-established player.
Yep.
Those 2 guys have been out injured. And just look at the job that Umaga Jensen and Sullivan did on Friday night. They set a standard. And then there were other guys, their loose forwards were outstanding.
Yeah, they have been all season.
Yeah, and so, look, it's a very potent team. And I guess the message for any other team that's going to play them is exactly what the Waratahs were thinking before the game. If you can't stop them there, then you're probably in for a pretty difficult night.
So Vern Cotter, who's coming off the bye in a situation where they're 1-4, and they have to win this game. If they don't win this game, I think they're more than 2 wins outside of a top 6 spot at that point.
Then, yeah.
And you're now playing a team that comes in with a sail full of confidence and 50 points. I suppose this is the test for the Blues. How much do you want it? Are you actually going to be part of this competition, and are you going to make a difference come finals time?
And what have you been able to achieve in your week off?
In the week off, yeah. And so, when you're talking about setting up some games this weekend, I mean, Friday night obviously kicks it off, but that game as well. Yeah. Saturday night, Blues versus Canes.
Yeah, a different kind of thing. That's about staying within reach for the Blues. I think it absolutely. We're still it's their 7th game of the year. And that's not even halfway through, but you're starting to talk about must-win games, or games of great importance. This obviously looms as one of them. Not quite sure about the wisdom of having 2 Super Rugby games on in the city on the same day. That you got the afternoon game and then the evening game.
Oh, it's great if you're watching it on TV.
Yeah, that I don't quite understand that, but.
Well, I don't think you're going to get people going to both, are they?
There's been some weirdness about the draw.
Yeah, there has been.
I don't know why we have a weekend where,
three teams don't play.
Yeah. So, but anyway.
I also want a couple of quick questions before we leave. When you're talking about that midfield, and if you're selecting the All Blacks now, and of course we're going to do this throughout this, and it's just meaningless because it's just silly old rugby debates, but if you're looking right now, Geordie isn't here playing. Rico has not been at his best for the Blues. If you're picking a 12 and 13 for the All Blacks and you're doing it out of Super Rugby form, and obviously the coaches are not going to select just out of Super Rugby form because that's not how the All Blacks operate. But who would you put at 12 and 13 now? Who are the two best midfielders playing in New Zealand at the moment?
Well, the best midfield combination in New Zealand at the moment, to my mind, is at the Chiefs, Quinn Tupaia, Anton Leonard-Brown. And I'd be comfortable with them in the black jersey. But as we know, Martin, current form... It doesn't matter whether it's Graham Henry or Steve Hansen or Ian Foster, and I'm sure it's the same with Scott Robertson. Current form is only part of it.
Well, it can only be part of it. I mean, we always used to see Martin Nonu never play his best in Super Rugby in the last few years of his obviously his rugby career here, but then he would always get the All Black jersey.
Yeah.
Frank Bunce was a bit like that towards the end of his career as well.
Yeah.
So, but Tupaia has certainly put his hand back up, hasn't he?
For sure. I'm not sure about... the wisdom of... I don't know whether Geordie is available for this series or not.
Against France?
Against France.
I'd hope so.
Yeah. But to me, they will still go a lot with what they know. Look, there's a lot of comment about Rico Ioane. He seems to be one of those guys who attracts it, and people... see, why isn't he ripping defences to shreds? Well, you name me one centre that does that. It's such a hard position now to attack. You've got your guy in 12 who's charged with taking the ball up hard and strong and occasionally making a bust. But the way defences are, it's hard for a centre to rip teams apart. He's still... And James Parsons is a guy whose opinions, obviously, we have to respect. A real thinker of the game. And he always talks about the impacts that we don't see, but his teammates do, the way he attracts defenders because they are aware of the danger, but also the number of times he gets across and cover defence and makes a try-saving tackle in the corner. I'm not mounting the defence for him here. I'm just saying that this is a guy whose opinions carry a lot of weight, certainly with me and a lot of other people. That's what he's saying about him. So I wouldn't be sticking a line through his name.
No, I just wish that the part of his game he needs developing is setting up his outsides and actually picking the right option. And quite often he picks the wrong option. He cuts in when he should be going out, or he's missing that guy, and he does it for the All Blacks. So that's my criticism of him. I think he's a good player, but to me he hasn't elevated to a great All Black centre yet.
Yeah, he hasn't played the number of tests that he has without people thinking.
Well, clearly. And also, I always go back to the same argument with Sam Cane, is that when you're selected by successive All Black coaches, that says something. I mean, you're talking about great brains of New Zealand rugby here.
But my whole thing about Sam Cane was just listening to what other players and coaches said about him. Yeah. And I never heard any say that, they didn't hold him in the highest regard, just the power with which he hit into a tackle or in the tackle.
Look, if you were there in Paris watching that game against Ireland in the quarterfinal, that was, I think, his best game.
What I'm saying about Ioane is that he's a guy that does attract a lot of criticism. People get frustrated because they see his potential and it not being realised. Going back to your original point, obviously the form combo is the Chiefs midfield combo, but there'll be other factors that come into it. But if it was Tupaia and Leonard-Brown that took the field in the first test match against France, I'd be happy with that. But I'm not sure that'll be the thinking.
Let us finish with the great stadium debate, which wrapped up. Well, has it wrapped up again?
I don't know.
And and this is the thing. I mean, look, and Tony's attitude is the same, I think, for a lot of us who've lived in Auckland a long time. I've been living here permanently this time since 1998. I'm just goddamn sick of this. I'm so over it. There has been so many reviews, so many reports, so many plans, so many summits, so many consortiums, and in the end, just make a bloody decision and get on with it.
Well, it seems that they have. Now, first of all, Eden Park, I don't want to say anything, detrimental about Eden Park. I think that the CEO they've got there, Nick Sautner, I think he's doing a lot of things to try and maximise that facility. They want to develop Eden Park. They want to create a really good stadium with a roof on it, things like that. There are always going to be issues with Eden Park in terms of the accessibility.
Yes.
And the biggest problem, of course, has been the compromises over when it can be used and even the very design of it. You can't put the roof out any further than that because the shadow that it'll cast, and so it doesn't provide adequate protection from the elements. And these are the things that Eden Park want to change. But then you look at what, and if they can do that, great. Then I'll be happy. If they stay there and they can do that, if they can redesign it, put a roof over it. Yeah. But I don't know who's going to pay.
Bring the crowd closer so that it's a bloody rectangle.
And stop with this trying to pretend that it's an international cricket field. I think you could develop that outer oval into a fabulous...
a boutique cricket ground.
Well, a test cricket ground.
Why not?
You just need to change the west stand, and so it's like a double-sided stand. You could put a stand over, the road that goes down, where all the tractors and all that are parked. Those sorts of things. But of course, getting that done, that costs money, and no doubt that people will jump up and down about that as well.
Of course, it's Auckland.
But look, you look at what, and I was watching the Sevens, and by the way, another fantastic performance by the Black Fern Sevens, and underlining why Georgia Miller was Player of the Year last year.
You voted for her, didn't you?
She was I was on the panel. She was in the final. In the final, she was phenomenal. But I looked at that new stadium that they've built on the site of the old airport, when you used to fly
in between the buildings.
Oh, terrifying. You could see what people were having for dinner.
Well, the washing was hanging out, and I was always worried whether there'd be a bit landing on the wing,
But look at that facility. Look how easy it is to access. Imagine what a stadium with its own economy around it, in terms of the hotels and the commercial development that they were planning, would do for downtown Auckland at a time that it really needs regenerating.
But if you could just do it, if you could just plonk it there, but it'd be 10 to 15 years of absolute chaos and carnage. And as a city, my only thing is, are there other things we can spend money on? I'd like a monorail going to the airport, for example. I'd like to get rid of the road cones. I'd like something under the harbour, maybe, mate. Maybe some better public transport.
But there's always this, and I think probably where they've failed is that they failed to convince the people doing the report that it would fund itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where
it was a beautiful design. That U-shaped design was terrific.
Oh, yeah, but so the design, the pictures of the sky path look great too, until someone realised that actually it's not physically possible to build it $51 million later. Yeah. But look, when it comes to local body, you look around the country and you think how poorly served we are at local government level. And I don't want to get too much into the political thing, but Martin, we get what we deserve in this country. We don't put up enough quality candidates for these people.
Hey, only a third of the people vote in council elections.
Exactly. They don't know who they're voting for.
Got no idea.
I mean, the part of town that I live in, you've got all these different groups or parties or whatever they are. They're actually all fragments of the same mainstream political party. They've just they break themselves up and call themselves different names. They can do enough to get elected by appealing to one particular group.
Yep. And that's only 30% of the people who can vote.
So if you garner enough support from, should we say the cycling fraternity or other area, that's probably enough to get you in, because the rest of us scratch our heads and think we don't know who we're voting for, and so we don't vote. So in that way. And
you get what you deserve. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn it back then quickly. Who wins 1 and 2 this weekend? Is the New Zealand team back on top after the weekend?
Yeah, look, I think the Chiefs. With all respect to the Reds, I think if they can't fix up their line out, then that's just asking for trouble. I think the Chiefs at home in front of a big crowd. Mackenzie, if he can run the show, Stevenson back in the team, if they can get close to a full strength team out there, then no, I definitely think the Chiefs. Maybe not a lot in it, but that's something to really lick the lips and.
Oh look, and also MP at home to New South Wales. Who's not going to be watching that game this weekend?
It's not a bad lineup of footy action, is it?
Cracking round for Super 8.
Yeah.
Super Rugby Round 8.
Yeah.
Awesome, Tone.
Okay, mate.
DSPN.